Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2018, directed by Steven Soderbergh, and this film is called Unsane. So Unsane is about this woman. She has had a very troubled past. She had a stalker that traumatized her very much, and so since then she has a lot of paranoid thoughts. She has delusions. She sees him where she knows that she couldn't possibly see him. So she's seeing a psychologist, and she's talking to this psychologist at this mental health facility, and she wants to actually keep seeing this psychologist because she feels very comfortable in confiding with her. So she's so comfortable that she accidentally lets drop that she had suicidal thoughts in the past. And this has been misunderstood by the psychologist, and she's actually very concerned for the well-being of the main character. So much so that the main character inadvertently commits herself to this facility for 7 days. Now, this woman sees this as a grave mistake. She needs to get back to work, so she's trying to fight against the authorities and prove that she's sane, but the more she struggles, the more insane she looks. So she comes to the realization that she's going to have to stay put for the 7 days and try the best that she can, but unfortunately that's going to be very difficult because she's convinced that one of the nurses is in fact her stalker. So she can't really trust her thoughts 100%, so it could be delusion, but then again it could be reality, and if it is reality, she is in a lot of danger. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on Unsane. I was actually reasonably excited to see this film. When I saw the trailer, I thought this looks very weird, and the fact that it was shot on an iPhone gave it definitely a very creative vibe, and that creative vibe is something I applaud, especially in Hollywood. In these higher budget sort of films, I want to see different approaches to storytelling, and Steven Soderbergh definitely has that approach with Unsane. And so I thought, alright, well, what is Steven Soderbergh going to produce in this movie? This is a movie about basically delusion and paranoia, and that can be a very scary thing, just because it's something that a lot of people go through. And so those were the expectations coming into Unsane, and I will say that although I thought the first half of this film was absolutely brilliant, the second half causes this movie to be an absolute disappointment, and it basically produces a film that I believe is one of the most overrated experiences of 2018, which is something I'll go into a little bit later, but I'll start off with the positives. And the biggest positive to the film was the very peculiar way that the iPhone gives this movie. The peculiar sort of environment, the very uneasy environment that is actually set inside this mental facility. And this is something that I think really works in its favour, because it gives you that impression that there's a lot of paranoia, there's a lot of delusions, and the paranoia and delusion gives you an enemy within yourself. And that's very scary. Is that, okay, usually when you have a traditional enemy, you know who you're fighting against, but because you don't know who Claire Foy in this movie is fighting against, it gives the danger a lot of avenues, and so you're not quite sure where the danger is coming from, and that can be very discomforting. And so the uncomfortable levels that are produced through that peculiar atmosphere and through the sense of delusion and paranoia, I think really grabs you, and it creates a lot of suspense, ultimately not knowing what's around the corner and not knowing who to trust. Can you even trust yourself? That creates suspense. And so I thought the overall uncertainty, it is a whirlwind, and that whirlwind captures you, and I just thought it was a very dark and unnerving experience that Steven Soderbergh manages to create. The suspense, not knowing whether or not this nurse is in fact going to hurt this woman, or in fact this woman is actually insane. I just think that, okay, that whirlwind of uncertainty creates something that's very, very entertaining. And so the peculiar sort of visuals play a strong effect with that psychology that makes a film that really should have been an absolute masterpiece. I kept thinking to myself, how is Steven Soderbergh going to actually execute this film? And if he executes it in a way that I was hoping he would, I thought this would have been an absolute standout and probably the best film of 2018. So the overall dialogue, I thought, was very, as I said, it's very personal. It feels like you're beside Claire Foy in this movie, and you're going along. You're one of these patients, and so that iPhone quality, it takes a little bit of getting used to at the start, but I think it really plays a strong positive because it just gives you a different sort of atmosphere, and that atmosphere is like being in a mental facility. Now, I have actually been in a mental facility after I had cancer. They were worried for my well-being, so I was in a mental health care facility, and I actually thought, all right, the overall iPhone gives it that sort of that odd sort of feeling, and that odd feeling creates that sense of paranoia, and the paranoia in this movie is by far the best thing that has going for it. But unfortunately, by the halfway stage, there is a revelation, and that revelation completely destroys the paranoia, it completely destroys the suspense, and in turn completely destroys everything that the movie has going for it. And I was very disappointed by this because Steven Soderbergh, I expected so much more from a well-established director. This movie didn't know how to execute all the good things it had going for it. The movie goes down some avenues that were were absolutely ridiculous on the point of being laughably bad. And so there were plot points that I thought it got to it very, very quickly. I thought, all right, well, there were so many questions that needed answering and the movie never really answers them. I thought, all right, well, is this down to the fact she's mentally ill? Is this down to the fact that it's in a mental health facility? But that's never answered. And so everything is very conveniently tied up. And in the end, what it is a film that the second half completely destroys the first half. And so I'm not really buying the fact, okay, Steven Soderbergh, obviously this is a well-established director. It must be a good film. But if I'm being brutally honest, I'm calling Steven Soderbergh out for the lazy sort of second half this film has and the really disappointing taste that it left in my mouth by the end. I thought Claire Foy was very good in the first half of this film as the main character. As I said, you don't know whether or not she's onto something. The way she reacts, I thought was very authentic, and the way she acted and the way she tried to push the authorities, the more it was actually looking really bad for her. So it was like a lose-lose situation. But then the revelation is made, and I thought her performance goes downhill rapidly. Is that everything turns into a farce, and that to me was the biggest disappointment, because I thought that Steven Soderbergh, being this established director, was going to tie up these loose ends a lot better than he does. And so, as I said, it does go beyond the point of ridiculous, and so I disconnected myself well before the end, therefore I checked out well before the end, and I just wanted the film to finish. And so you can't really judge a film based on the first half. It was brilliant when all that uncertainty was swirling around, but when the revelation happened, it's basically a floodgate for mediocrity, and I don't really share the love that this movie has. I just think it was one of the most it's gone from being the most impressive film of 2018 to one of the most bitterly disappointing, because it just lost all of its opportunity, and I just surprised that someone like Steven Soderbergh didn't have control. It's like a runaway train, it's crashed, it's burned, and it's basically beyond repair. So that was definitely a massive disappointment, one of the most disappointing experiences for me, and it just, I'm not sharing the love for it. I just think a lot of people might like this movie based on the fact that it is Steven Soderbergh, but for me, yes, it is very unique in the way it's shot. There are really likeable qualities, but unfortunately the second half completely destroys the first half, and as a result of that, I'm only going to give Unsane 1.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.